Deep in the forgotten archives of the Arizona Territory sits a sheriff's report dated October 15th, 1876, a document hidden beneath decades of dust and neglect. It tells of human remains found in the root cellar of the abandoned Henley Ranch, 12 miles northeast of what would later become Phoenix. What makes the case haunting isn't only the brutality of the killing, but a chilling line scrawled in the deputy's notes: the family ate him. They didn't know, but they ate him. For nearly a century and a half, the descendants of those who once knew the truth have kept silent, unwilling to let the shame stain their bloodline. Before I take you deeper into the tale of Martha Henley and the most shocking family dinner in Arizona's territorial history, I need you to do something for me. Tap that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about frontier justice. The fall of 1876 brought more than cooler nights to the dusty cattle ranges of Arizona. The Henley Ranch stood like a scar against the desert, its cluster of weather-beaten buildings gathered around a main house that had already seen too much wear. Samuel Henley first staked his claim in 1863, when cattle dreams lured men west with promises bigger than their pockets. By 1876, those dreams had soured. The ranch at its peak employed close to 24 men, making it one of the larger spreads in the valley. Samuel's brothers Jacob and William followed him west in 1865, with their wives and children building what Samuel liked to call a proper family enterprise. The Henley name carried weight from the Salt River outposts to the territorial capital in Tucson. Martha entered this world in 1869. Samuel's mail-order bride from Missouri, a pale young woman who had lost her family to cholera and was desperate to escape living as a burden to distant relatives. At just 22, she possessed a delicate beauty that shone in photographs but quickly faded under the harsh desert sun. Samuel, 10 years older, married her not for love, but because a ranch of his size demanded a wife to run the household. The early years held promise. Martha was literate, skilled with domestic tasks, and carried herself with a quiet dignity that impressed even the most skeptical neighbors. But the promise unraveled when children failed to come. By 1872, whispers began. In a land where survival depended on large families, a childless wife was more curse than blessing. Samuel's frustration hardened into cruelty. His brothers followed his lead, treating Martha less like kin and more like a servant who never lived up to expectations. Her days blurred into endless work up before dawn, to light the cook fires, tending to meals for as many as 30 during peak season. Scrubbing, mending, washing, always moving, never resting. At first, Samuel's sisters-in-law offered her friendship, but even they drifted away as her husband's disdain grew harsher. Arizona in 1876 remained wild with lawmen scarce, and Tucson's sheriff 60 miles away across treacherous desert. Disputes were settled with bullets and bluster. Divorce was nearly impossible, and a woman cast out faced choices that were grim at best and fatal at worst. Hard years followed. A bitter winter and searing summer destroyed herds across the territory, and Samuel's temper, already sharp, grew more violent under the weight of financial losses. He drank heavily, gambled at cattle auctions, and returned home fuming at neighbors who thrived while his own ranch struggled. Martha bore the brunt of his fury. A burnt loaf meant she was useless. A poor harvest meant she was cursed. His brothers echoed him, creating a climate of cruelty that pressed on her every waking hour. Isolated from family, cut off from help, and with neighbors 8 miles away, Martha was alone in a desert that seemed determined to break her. Martha lived inside a bubble of hostility, her world shrinking to nothing but the ranch buildings and the endless grind of labor that no one ever thanked her for. By 1876, Samuel's cruelty had grown far past insults. What began as rough shoving during arguments had become outright beatings. She had learned to recognize the signs, the way his shoulders squared when he had been drinking, the hard stare he gave her, when the ranch books didn't balance the dangerous silence that always came before his worst rages. The night of October 3rd, 1876, began like so many others, with Samuel stumbling home from the saloon in Wickenburg, reeking of whiskey and bitterness. The cattle auction had been a disaster. Prices nearly cut in half from the year before, and Samuel had watched other ranchers slap backs and celebrate, while his own herd drew nothing but insults disguised as offers. Martha was scrubbing the last dishes by lamplight when she heard his boots on the porch. She didn't lift her eyes when he came in. Keeping her head down sometimes kept him from finding a reason to explode. Worthless, he muttered, his voice thick with drink. Absolutely worthless. She kept washing quiet, careful. Sometimes, if she gave him nothing to work with, the storm passed. Sometimes. "You hear me talking to you?" His voice cut sharper now. "I hear you, Samuel," she said softly without turning. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Setting the plate aside, she turned slowly. Samuel swayed in the doorway, face red from whiskey, and he'd his eyes mean. Behind him on the porch, Jacob and William lounged with their bottles, watching like men settling in for a familiar show. 12 years, Samuel slurred. 12 years I've kept you fed and housed. 12 years of nothing. No children, no luck. Just a useless woman eating my food and wearing my clothes. Martha stayed silent. She knew words only sharpened the knife. The Henderson woman has 6 children. 6. Patterson's wife is carrying her 8th. But my wife, nothing. Empty rooms, empty hands. He lurched closer, the sour burn of liquor rolling off him, his clothes thick with sweat and tobacco. "Samuel, please," Martha whispered. "The men can hear. Let them hear," he bellowed, seizing her wrist in a grip like iron. "Let them all hear about Samuel Henley's barren wife." She gasped as his fingers crushed her flesh. But Jacob and William only watched through the open doorway with the cold curiosity of men too used to this scene. "You cost me money," Samuel hissed. "No sons to work the ranch, no daughters to marry off. You're worse than useless. You're expensive." She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Samuel, you're hurting me." "Hurting you?" His laugh came out like shattered glass. "Lady, you don't know what hurt is? Maybe it's time you learned." The first blow snapped across her face and sent her staggering into the kitchen table, pain lancing through her side as her hip struck the corner. Before she could draw a breath, he was on her again. "This is for 12 years of disappointment," he snarled, his fist slamming into her ribs. "This is for making me look a fool in front of every rancher in the valley." Martha raised her arms to shield herself, but Samuel was built by years of ranch work, his fists heavy as iron, each strike stealing the air from her lungs and driving her further into a pit of agony. "Samuel, stop!" Martha gasped, the taste of blood filling her mouth. He only grinned, yanking her hair back so she had to meet his eyes gone wild with whiskey and hate. "I should have stopped 12 years ago," he sneered. "Should have left you to rot in Missouri with the rest of your worthless family." His hand released her hair, only to backhand her across the face. The crack of it split her lip and sent her crashing to the floor. She lay there, stunned vision swimming, while the sound of laughter drifted in from the porch. "Look at her boys," Samuel called, his voice thick with triumph. "Look at the great Martha Henley now." Through the open doorway, she saw Jacob raise his bottle in a mocking salute. William chuckled, his laughter sharp and cruel. Maybe now she'll learn her place, Sam, Jacob said. About time someone put her in it, William added. Samuel looked down at her like she was dirt on his boots. Get up, he ordered. Martha's body screamed in protest as she pulled herself to her knees, then to her feet, blood dripping from her mouth, her ribs aching with every breath. Samuel smirked. That's better. Remember this the next time you disappoint me. He turned away, ready to join his brothers outside his victory complete. But something inside Martha shifted. The fear was still there, but beneath it, steady and hot, burned something stronger. 12 years of humiliation and bruises had been stoking it, and now it flared to life. Samuel didn't see her hand close around the carving knife on the table. 8 inches of sharpened steel, a tool she had used for countless meals, now felt different in her grasp. It felt like release. Samuel, she said softly. He turned expecting an apology, maybe a plea. Instead, he saw a swollen, bloodied face set in an expression he didn't recognize, the knife in her hand gleaming in the lamplight. Martha, what the hell, he started, but the words choked off. This wasn't the cowering wife he'd beaten into silence for a dozen years. This was something else. The confidence drained from his drunken eyes as the moment stretched between them. Put that down, he barked, though his voice lacked conviction. Martha put it down now. She didn't move. She stood steady, the knife glinting, her voice calm and cold. 12 years, she said. 12 years of your fists. 12 years of your brother's laughter. 12 years of being told, I'm nothing. Blood from her split lip stained her apron, each dark drop like a tally mark against his cruelty. Samuel shifted, glancing toward the porch, but something in her eyes warned him not to call for help. For the first time in their marriage, he hesitated. Martha took a step forward, her voice growing stronger with each word. I've cooked your meals. I've cleaned your house. I've mended your clothes. I've carried your burdens and never once complained. And in return, you gave me nothing but pain. Her words cut sharper than the blade she held, and Samuel realized too late that the balance of power in the room had changed forever. And what have I gotten in return? Martha's voice cracked like a whip in the silence. Martha, please, Samuel stammered. What have I gotten, Samuel? She pressed, her voice rising with a power he had never heard from her. For the first time in 12 years, it was Samuel who looked afraid. Out on the porch, the laughter had gone quiet. Jacob and William must have felt the shift in the air, though neither moved. The desert night pressed in around the ranch, wide and merciless, as if the stars themselves were waiting to see what happened next. Samuel licked his lips nervously. Look, maybe I was a little rough tonight, but you know the pressure, the business. The pressure, Martha repeated, her tone flat. Your pressure, your problems, your failures. And somehow they're always my fault, aren't they? The cattle prices drop. It's because God is punishing you for your barren wife. The crops fail. It's because I bring bad luck. Your brothers need someone to mock, so Martha's the easy target. Samuel shook his head weakly. That's not, I never said. You didn't have to say it. Martha cut in, her voice steady, the knife in her hand glinting as she adjusted her grip. You showed me. Every day. In your fists, in your words, in the way you looked at me like I was a burden you couldn't shake. Samuel's eyes darted to the door, but he didn't call out. Something in Martha's face froze him in place. What do you want? He whispered. And then she smiled, not the quiet, careful smile of the woman who had endured 12 years of humiliation, but the terrible smile of someone who had finally reached the end of the line and seen the truth waiting there. "I want to show you what worthless really looks like," she said. What followed lasted only seconds, but it would stain Arizona Territory history forever. Samuel lunged too slow, too dulled by drink to realize what he was up against. Martha met him with the strength born of years of ranch work and years of rage, bottled tight. The knife slid between his ribs, straight into his heart, as clean and sharp as any surgeon's cut. Samuel's eyes widened, shock flooding his face. Then confusion, then emptiness. He collapsed first to his knees, then forward onto the kitchen floor with a soft thud. The silence that followed was deafening. Martha stood over him, chest heaving, the knife slick with his blood, listening to the sudden stillness inside the house. The brothers outside had gone silent too. Maybe they had heard something, maybe not. Either way, Martha knew she had only moments before they came looking. She knelt beside Samuel's body, not in grief, but in cold calculation. Samuel was dead, and she would hang if caught. Yet she felt no sorrow, no regret, only a startling clarity and a deep, almost peaceful sense of completion. This was always how it was going to end. She could see that now. The only question left was what to do next. With the precision of long practice, Martha dragged Samuel's body toward the root cellar, muffling the sound with an old quilt. The cellar, cool and dark, had kept meat fresh through countless desert summers. Now, it would serve another purpose. As she worked, her mind moved 3 steps ahead, steady and methodical, the same way she had once planned meals for 30 hungry men. Samuel's brothers would expect to see him come morning. They'd have questions if he vanished. But what if he didn't vanish? What if he was still here in a way they could never imagine? She paused by the cutting block, her hand brushing across the wood worn smooth by years of chopping and carving. For the first time in her marriage, Martha Henley smiled with true satisfaction. The brothers would finally learn what worthless really meant. Dawn painted the desert in gold and orange, the kind of sunrise that should have been beautiful, but instead cast a pale light over the scene of quiet horror. Martha had not slept. She had spent the long hours before morning cleaning the kitchen until not a drop of blood remained, wrapping Samuel's body carefully in the cellar below and planning what came next. To anyone looking in, it would appear Samuel had gone to bed after a night of drinking. But Martha was already preparing for the next step. At first light, she set the black iron stock pot on the stove, the same pot she had used countless times to feed ranch hands. She built the fire hot and steady with oak logs, her face calm, her movements sure. The air filled with the dry crackle of burning wood. Today the pot would serve a different purpose, one far darker than stew or Sunday roasts. Martha moved with the focused determination of a woman who knew her survival depended on every detail. Martha moved with the steady rhythm of a woman who had spent more than a decade running a ranch kitchen. From the root cellar, she carried Samuel back piece by piece, each trip measured and careful. Her hands worked as they always had, the same practiced motions she'd used when butchering deer elk or wild boar. The cuts were the same, the difference only in what the meat once had been. She separated portions with precision, setting aside what could be cooked and bagging the rest in burlap to be buried later beneath the desert sand. By mid-morning, she had her work arranged neatly on the kitchen block. Everything in its place, everything under control. Upstairs, Jacob and William began to stir, groaning their way out of whiskey-soaked sleep. Martha heard the shuffle of boots, the coughs, the doors creaking open. Soon they'd be hungry, and soon they'd be asking where their brother was. She already had the answer waiting for them. Samuel had risen early, restless after the failure of the cattle auction. He'd gone off toward Wickenburg, she would say, talking about finding new markets, maybe even California. The story was believable. Samuel was known for his temper, his sudden impulses, and his half-baked schemes. He could disappear for a week or more without warning. No one would think twice. "Where's Sam?" Jacob grumbled as he stumbled into the kitchen, his hair sticking out, his eyes red. Martha stood at the stove, calmly stirring the big iron pot. The smell filled the room, rich, savory, heavy with onions, herbs, and the kind of spices that could cover anything. "He left before dawn," Martha said, her voice steady, never turning from the pot. Business on his mind. Rode out toward Wickenburg. William drifted into the doorway, bleary and scowling. "Didn't say nothing." "You know how he is," Martha replied, ladling steaming portions into bowls. "Said something about California buyers. Could be gone a week, maybe more." The brothers looked at each other, but neither questioned it. Samuel was always chasing one scheme or another. They slumped at the table, grateful for hot food and coffee strong enough to fight their hangovers. Jacob spooned into the stew, paused, then nodded. "This is good," he said. "What is it?" Martha felt her chest tighten, but her voice didn't waver. "Boar," she said. "Samuel brought it back from that hunting trip last month. I'd been keeping it in the cellar." William frowned, chewing thoughtfully. "Don't taste like boar." Martha stirred the pot again, her back to them. "I tried a new spice mix. Picked it up from a trader passing through, thought it might change the flavor. That seemed enough for them. They dug in spoon after spoon, hungry men not inclined to question a free meal. Martha washed dishes, her hand steady now, listening to the scrape of spoons against bowls as Jacob and William ate heartily. "Sam say when he be back?" Jacob asked through a mouthful. "Wasn't sure," Martha answered. "Depends what he finds in California. Could be 2 weeks, could be longer." Neither looked troubled. Samuel had left them holding the ranch more times than they could count. They were used to it. Martha poured them second helpings, making sure their bowls were filled again before clearing the table. They ate without hesitation, without suspicion, without any sense of what they were consuming. She set the leftover stew aside, claiming it would serve well enough for supper. All the while she kept her face calm, her movements smooth, her secret sealed inside the silence of that kitchen. In truth, Martha buried the scraps far out in the desert where coyotes and vultures would take care of what she couldn't risk leaving behind. In the days that followed, she kept Samuel's absence alive, with the same careful discipline she brought to her household duties. She intercepted letters answering inquiries in Samuel's name. She told neighbors he'd gone chasing better markets, maybe California, maybe even San Francisco. It was believable. In the Arizona territory of 1876, men vanished for weeks at a time, sometimes chasing opportunity, sometimes running from debt. Samuel's sudden disappearance fit neatly into both patterns. Still, Martha knew she had bought herself only a small reprieve. Sooner or later, someone would expect proof of Samuel's return. Sooner or later, her story would fray at the edges. She used every spare hour to prepare for escape, collecting supplies, a little at a time, studying Samuel's maps for routes south, calculating how far she could make it before suspicion finally caught up to her. For 12 years, she had been trapped on this ranch, like a prisoner, her life measured out in chores and insults. Now with Samuel rotting in the earth and his brothers none the wiser, she tasted freedom for the first time. Jacob and William, oblivious, seemed almost relieved by their brother's absence. The ranch ran smoother without Samuel's temper fouling every decision. Martha watched them with a satisfaction colder than the desert night. They had no idea what they had eaten. They had no idea they lived in a house where their brother had died screaming on the kitchen floor. They had no idea the woman they had mocked for over a decade had turned the tables on them with the sharp edge of a knife and the sharper edge of her will. But Martha knew her time was running short. If she wanted to leave, she would have to close the story in a way that none of them could ever forget. And so, she planned one last meal. October 17th, 1876. The roundup was finished, the hired hands paid and gone until spring. Only the family remained: Jacob and William, their wives Rebecca and Catherine, and 6 children between them. Martha suggested a Sunday feast, a gesture of gratitude after the hard season. They agreed, grateful for her effort, never suspecting her true purpose. That evening, the family gathered in the dining room, the table groaning with food. Roasted meatloaves of fresh bred vegetables pulled from the garden, even a rare apple pie from Martha's carefully preserved fruit. Rebecca looked over the spread in surprise. "This is quite a feast, Martha," she said. "I wanted to do something special," Martha replied smoothly. "With Samuel away, I thought it best we remind ourselves of what we still have." Catherine smiled, though her words carried a faint edge. "It's been quiet, without Sam's voice shaking the rafters. Tonight feels like a proper gathering." The children chattered happily, their faces bright at the sight of food richer than their usual rations. Jacob carved the roast, the knife slicing through meat that was dark, tender, and fragrant with herbs from Martha's garden. He served generous cuts all around. William chewed thoughtfully, then reached for more. "This is excellent," he said, "but I can't quite place it." "What kind of meat is this?" Martha's pulse hammered in her throat, but her face never betrayed it. She folded her hands neatly in her lap and said with the calm of a woman who had rehearsed every line, "It's something Samuel left behind." "It's from Samuel's last hunting trip," Martha said smoothly. "He brought back more than we could eat, so I preserved the rest in the cellar. This cut has been waiting." "Well, whatever it is, it's fine eating," Jacob declared, carving himself another portion. Sam always did know how to bring home good game. The talk at the table drifted easily: cattle prices, winter supplies, the chores that lay ahead. Martha joined in just enough to keep suspicion away, but mostly she sat silent, watching them eat, watching them enjoy what they could never truly understand. Young Thomas, Jacob's boy, ate heartily, his face flushed with satisfaction. "Aunt Martha, this is the best meat I've ever had. What's your secret?" Martha's smile flickered a pang, cutting through her composure. Thomas had always been kinder than the rest, more curious, less cruel. He didn't deserve this. None of the children did. "Sometimes the secret is patience," she said softly. "Good things come to those who wait." Her eyes moved slowly around the table, fixing each face in her memory. Rebecca and Catherine, one once warm, had grown cold with years of silence. They hadn't laid hands on her, but they'd watched, they'd turned away, they'd allowed it. Their silence was a cruelty of its own. The children were learning from their fathers, Thomas already adopting his father's dismissive air, the younger ones absorbing lessons of contempt without even knowing it. The pattern was set to repeat unless someone shattered it. Martha, Jacob said, dragging her back from her thoughts, "This has been wonderful, but we need to talk about what happens if Sam's business trip drags on. Winter's close. We can't be caught short on supplies." "I expect he'll be back soon," Martha replied evenly. "Samuel never stays gone more than a month." William leaned forward. "Still, we should prepare. Maybe send someone to Wickenburg to see if he's been spotted. Better to know for sure." Martha nodded, though inside her chest tightened. A search would expose everything. Samuel hadn't gone to Wickenburg, hadn't gone anywhere but 6 feet under. She was out of time. "That's wise," she said calmly. We can discuss it after supper." But she had no intention of discussing anything. By then she would be gone. She had already written the letter, the words chosen with precision, meant to wound and unsettle to make sure the Henley family understood exactly what they had eaten. It would be found after she disappeared into the desert night. While the family lingered at the table laughing, eating, talking, Martha slipped in and out of the kitchen. Each time she gathered what she had hidden: water skins, dried food, a bedroll, the coins she had scraped together over the years. Her horse waited in the mesquite, half a mile from the house, saddled, packed, ready. "Martha, you've outdone yourself." Catherine called, her voice carrying warmth Martha had not heard in years. "This meal is wonderful. The children are begging for you to make it again. I'm so glad you're enjoying it." Martha answered, her voice steady as her hands checked her pack one last time. She did not look back toward the dining room. She did not need to. She already knew what she was leaving behind: a family forever changed, a secret sealed in their stomachs, and a story that would stain the Arizona territory for generations. Everything Martha needed was packed food, water, warm clothes, the few coins she'd saved, and a small pistol lifted from Samuel's gun cabinet, loaded and ready. She prayed she wouldn't need it, but she had no illusions about the dangers ahead. Back in the dining room, she played her part flawlessly, accepting compliments, clearing dishes, smiling when Jacob slapped his belly, and declared the feast worth repeating every month. The family laughed and murmured their agreement, already making plans for future gatherings. Martha nodded, her face calm, her mind already out in the desert, racing ahead to freedom. Just when you thought this story had reached its darkest turn, the nightmare at the Henley Ranch was only beginning. If this tale has you on edge, make sure to share it with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit the like button to support more stories like this, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next in the chronicles of frontier justice gone horribly wrong. After the meal, the family drifted into the parlor for after-dinner conversation, their voices warm and careless in the lamplight. Martha slipped away to her room. She changed quickly into the plain traveling clothes she'd set aside, dark garments made for distance, not comfort. She pinned her hair back tight, secured the small hidden pockets she had sewn into her coat, and shouldered her pack. On the kitchen table, she left an envelope propped against the coffee tin where it could not be missed. Inside, written in her neat, steady hand, was her confession. Samuel's abuse, his death, and the grim truth of what they had eaten. She did not name it vengeance, only clarity. The family would know. They would always know. Martha stood one last time in the kitchen where she had poured 12 years of her life into meals and labor. She thought of all the mornings that began before dawn, all the nights that ended in silence, all the small pieces of herself she had given away until nothing remained. Now, with Samuel gone and her confession waiting, this room would no longer be a place of drudgery. It would become the center of a nightmare. She slipped out the back door into the desert night. Behind her, the Henley Ranch glowed with warm light, a picture of peace and prosperity. Soon it would be cursed ground, its name whispered in dread from Tucson to the Salt River. She mounted her waiting horse and turned south toward the border, the desert stretching vast and empty beneath the silver wash of moonlight. At last she felt what she had been denied for 12 long years: freedom. By sunrise on October 18th, Martha was 20 miles south, following half-forgotten trails that would leave little trace. Back at the ranch, the day began like any other. Jacob and William rose with the sun, expecting breakfast, waiting in the kitchen as always. Instead, they found silence. No Martha, no food, only an envelope propped against the coffee tin. Jacob picked it up, frowning, his voice carrying through the quiet house. "Martha," he called. But the only answer was the hush of the desert outside. "Where's breakfast?" Jacob called into the quiet house. No answer. William checked Martha's room and returned a few minutes later, his expression grim. She's gone. Took her clothes, her things. Bed's not been slept in. Jacob frowned, more puzzled than worried. Where would she go? She's got no kin, no money. Maybe she finally got tired of waiting for Sam. William shrugged. Women get notions when they're left too long. It was Rebecca who found the letter. She had gone to the kitchen for coffee and noticed the envelope propped against the tin. Her name was written on the front, in Martha's careful hand, along with the words, "To the Henley family." Her voice trembled as she called out Jacob. "William, you need to see this." The brothers gathered close. Rebecca opened the envelope, her fingers shaking. Jacob, the better reader, took the pages and began. "My dear family." He stopped, his face draining of color. "What is it?" William snapped. "What's it say?" Jacob's voice faltered barely above a whisper as he read on. "By the time you find this, I will be gone from the ranch, never to return. I feel I owe you an explanation for my sudden departure and for the events of recent weeks. Samuel did not go to California. Samuel will never go anywhere again." Rebecca gasped. Catherine appeared in the doorway, sensing the tension. The children, still in the parlor, laughed and talked, unaware their world was about to end. Jacob swallowed hard and forced himself to continue. "On the night of October 3rd, after years of abuse and cruelty, at his hands and yours, I killed my husband in this kitchen." Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. William snatched the pages, reading faster, now his face twisted in disbelief. The letter described it all: the beating that had broken Martha's last defenses, the knife, the disposal of the body, the careful preparation that followed. But it was the final lines that froze the room in silence. "The roast you enjoyed at last night's dinner was Samuel. You have consumed your brother, your husband, your father. For 12 years you told me I was worthless. I wanted to show you what worthless truly means. You treated me like an animal. So I treated Samuel like one. May you carry the taste with you for the rest of your lives. Martha Henley." The letter slipped from William's hands and fluttered to the floor like a dead bird. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the ticking of the mantel clock and Rebecca's sharp, panicked breathing. Then Catherine lurched to the sink, retching violently as her body tried to expel what her mind now knew. Rebecca followed, choking and sobbing. William doubled over next, his breakfast spilling across the floor. Jacob alone remained standing, his face ashen, his eyes fixed on nothing. He was frozen in the terrible realization that the meek, quiet woman they had mocked and beaten for 12 years had outplayed them all. Of all the Henley brothers, Jacob had been the loudest in his scorn for Martha, the cruelest in his little inventions of humiliation. Now her revenge pressed down on him like a weight he could not throw off. His son Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway, his young face pale with confusion. "Pa, what's wrong? What's happening?" Jacob turned on him, his eyes wild, and the boy shrank back. How could he explain? How could he tell his children that they had eaten their uncle, that the quiet woman who had cooked their meals for years had fed them human flesh? His voice broke as he barked, "Get the children out, now!" Rebecca hesitated, but Jacob roared again, shattering what composure he had left. She hurried the bewildered children away, their questions unanswered. William steadied himself first. His face was ashen, his voice hollow. "We have to find Samuel. We have to bury him right." They began searching the ranch buildings, immediately following the letter's instructions to the root cellar. What they found ended all doubt. Wrapped in quilts like so many slaughtered animals, were the butchered remains of Samuel Henley. The cuts were clean, the meat carefully sectioned, the missing portions lining up exactly with what the family had been fed these past 2 weeks. Jacob doubled over his body, convulsing as he vomited again and again. William stood frozen, tears were running down his face. "Dear God," he whispered. What kind of monster was she? But even as the words left him, he knew the truth. Martha had not been born a monster. She had been made one piece by piece, year by year, by their cruelty, by Samuel's fists, by their silence. The reality settled heavy in the cellar's cool air. They would have to summon the law report, the killing admit that Samuel's wife had fled into the desert. But no investigation could undo what had already been done. The children would need to be told something, though never the full truth. The neighbors would ask questions, and lies would have to be crafted. The Henley name, once a pillar in the valley, was ruined forever. And most unbearable of all was the completeness of Martha's revenge. She had not just killed her husband, she had forced his family to consume him, to become unwilling accomplices in their own disgrace. She had hollowed out the Henley legacy with a single act. 3 days later, Jacob rode to Wickenburg and confessed enough of the story to bring in the territorial marshal. Deputy Harrison Clark, a hard-bitten man in his 50s, who thought he had seen every shade of frontier violence, rode out to the ranch with Jacob. He emerged from the root cellar pale shaken in a way no outlaw gunfight had ever managed. In his official report filed October 15, 1876, Clark wrote the words that sealed the legend of the Henley Ranch forever. The family ate him. They didn't know, but they ate him. Clark's official report, filed on October 23, 1876, stands as the only surviving legal record of the Henley case. In measured language, the deputy detailed the discovery of human remains in the root cellar, the evidence of systematic butchering, and the written confession of the accused. What he did not put in that formal account was the truth that haunted him most. In a private letter to his wife, Clark wrote, "They can't eat. Any of them. They've wasted away in only days. The women can't speak, the men jump at shadows. It's like they've seen something that broke their minds." The manhunt for Martha Henley stretched south for nearly 100 miles, trackers following hoofprints across rock and sand until the trail vanished near the Mexican border. Some swore she died in the desert, her bones left to bleach under the merciless sun. Others believed she had crossed into Mexico and slipped into another life beyond the reach of American law. The truth was never found. The newspapers handled the story cautiously. The Arizona Weekly Miner carried the headline, "Rancher's Wife Murders, Husband Flees to Mexico," but left out the worst of it. The darker details spread instead by word of mouth passed from saloon to saloon, whispered in trading posts shared around campfires. Men lowered their voices when they told it. Women crossed themselves. Children listened wide-eyed and afraid. The Henley brothers did not last long after the scandal. Within 6 months, Jacob sold the ranch at a fraction of its worth and took his family north to Oregon. William followed soon after, moving his family to California. Both men abandoned the Henley name, burying it as surely as they had buried Samuel. The ranch itself lingered like a scar. Empty for years, it was eventually bought by a cattle outfit out of Texas. They tore down the old buildings and put up new ones, but the land never again held a family. Local superstition kept wives and children away. Only hired hands lived there, and even they were never told why the ground felt cursed. As for Martha, she was never seen again. Rumors surfaced now and then, a seamstress in Tucson, a woman running a boarding house in Tombstone, but none were proven. The official word was that she perished during her flight, another ghost claimed by the desert. Yet in 1889, 13 years after Samuel's death, a package arrived at the Wickenburg post office addressed simply to the people of Arizona Territory. Inside was a daguerreotype of a middle-aged woman standing before a modest house. On the back, written in a hand the postmaster swore matched Martha's, were the words, "Some things are worth the wait. M.H." The photograph was filed away, then lost, leaving only a line in postal records to suggest it ever existed. Whether Martha Henley died nameless in the desert or lived on to see the new century remains unknown. What endures is the story preserved in the brittle pages of an old report and in the whispers that still curl across Arizona nights. The family ate him. They didn't know, but they ate him. The shock of Martha Henley's revenge did not end with the family she left broken and disgraced. Word spread across the territory despite every effort to contain it, whispered from ranch to ranch, town to town. It became a cautionary tale, and in its wake something shifted. Stories surfaced of neighbors stepping in when a man's temper ran too hot, of sheriffs warning husbands that they might end up like Samuel Henley if they didn't mend their ways. Fear not law forced some men to temper their cruelty. The case also reshaped law enforcement in small but lasting ways. New protocols were introduced for handling domestic violence, and in some jurisdictions, women were quietly appointed as community advocates for wives who had nowhere else to turn. These changes came too late for Martha, but they marked a grudging recognition that the system had failed her completely. Nearly a century later, in 1967, historian Dr. Margaret Steinberg revisited the case in her groundbreaking book, Hidden Violence: Women and the Western Frontier. Her conclusion was stark. Martha Henley had not been born a monster. She had been forged by a society that prized cattle more than women, that considered wives property rather than people. Her revenge was horrific, Steinberg wrote, but it was also perfectly calculated to exploit the deepest fears of the culture that had brutalized her. Time buried the Henley Ranch as surely as it buried the family's shame. The land changed hands, sold and resold, until the old story became a rumor tucked into footnotes and forgotten records. Phoenix grew, swallowing the desert around it. Where the ranch once stood, there is now a shopping center, bright lights and pavement covering the ground that once ran red. Shoppers walk past without knowing, without even guessing that beneath their feet lies the echo of one of the most shocking acts of frontier justice ever committed. Its tragic past is unknown to the thousands who pass through that ground every day. Where once stood the Henley Ranch, there is now only pavement and storefronts, the land's history paved over and forgotten. But in the archives of the Arizona Historical Society, the truth remains preserved in acid-free folders, Deputy Marshal Clark's official reports, the surviving newspaper clippings, and even a copy of Martha's confession letter. More than 140 years later, her words still chill anyone who dares to read them. Written in precise, steady script, her calm tone makes the horrors she describes even more disturbing. Her final lines remain unforgettable. I spent 12 years learning what it meant to be worthless in the eyes of those who claim to love me. I wanted to teach them the same lesson, to show them how it feels to discover that something you value is worthless all along. They valued their family bonds, their shared meals, their masculine pride. I made all of those things worthless with a single dinner. Now, they know how I felt every day for 12 years. The Henley case stands apart in American crime, not only for its brutality, but for the methodical precision with which Martha carried out her revenge. This was no crime of passion, no desperate lashing out. It was planned, deliberate, and executed with unnerving calculation. The symmetry of her act remains the most disturbing truth of all. For 12 years she was treated as less than human, and in the end she reduced her husband to meat. She was told she was worthless, so she made their most sacred bonds family meals, pride worthless with one act of contamination. Denied power all her life, she claimed the ultimate power over life and death, even on a frontier where violence was common and justice often brutal. Martha Henley's crime stood apart. It forces us to confront questions we still struggle with today, about abuse, revenge, and what happens when a human being is pushed past the breaking point. Was she justified, or did she cross a line that can never be crossed, no matter the suffering endured? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if this story shook you, share it with someone who loves dark history. Hit the like button to support more stories like this, and subscribe so you never miss the next tale from America's shadowed past. The frontier was a place where ordinary people were driven to extraordinary extremes. And Martha Henley's story reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous person in the world is the one who has nothing left to lose. Thank you all very much for watching my video until the end. I sincerely appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.